Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Scott Melson. Hello, sir.
What's up, dude?
What's up? Happy Friday.
Happy freaking Friday, man. It has been a week.
It's Friday night in the big town. There's the potential for severe weather. Everyone is watching the weather reports today, and
According to Oklahoma Mesonet, Altus just hit 100 degrees.
did you say Mesonet?
Yeah, Oklahoma Mesonet. Is it Mesonet?
I think it's Mesonet.
Oh, maybe it's
Never heard
Mesonet.
Mesonet.
I always say Mesonet, but maybe it's Mesonet.
Never even considered it being Mesonet.
Mesonet actually makes more sense.
Mesocyclone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Meso sounds like mise en place, which I know is something that you admire.
Yeah, that's probably I cook with miso and use mise en place, so maybe that's maybe I said Mesonet. But
Here in the Mesonet.
Oklahoma Mesonet says Altus at 100 degrees in the month of April.
Ooh, golly.
Yeah.
Altus is a lot of things. Hot is one of them.
Yes.
Often,
Agreed.
frequently hot.
Yes.
Well, Scott, I'll tell you what. It's a good day to not be Brent Swadley.
I mean, right? Can I? What do you think? What do you think the word relationship means, Andy? Right? There's a quote from a movie, Love Actually, where Hugh Grant is playing the Prime Minister of the UK, talking about the U.S. and the special relationship between the U.S. and Great Britain, and he says, "I love that word relationship. Covers all manner of sins, doesn't it?"
That is appropriate.
Right.
So I guess let's talk about it, and then we factually, and then we'll add our editorial flair to it. So, listeners, by this point that you're listening, you probably know, because it's been literally in the headlines of every news outlet in the state for the last several weeks. This whole deal that we've talked about in the last 2 episodes or 3 episodes about Swadley's barbecue, tourism, all that stuff, money, blah, blah, blah. Since last week, the contract has been terminated, and then today, Director Winchester resigned from the Department of Tourism. And the state filed suit against Swadley's, and the governor and I guess Lieutenant Governor Pinnell was there, although I didn't see anything from him, held what they called a press conference. It was a one-way conversation in which the governor said, basically, I did not have sex with that woman. No, he said, I did not know.
No. He doesn't say I don't know. He says I do not have any relationship with Brent Swadley. What the hell does that mean, right? Because what he specifically, to me, that is a very carefully worded way to say that. Because he's not saying he doesn't know Brent Swadley. He's not saying he's ever spoken to him. He's not saying he's never met him. He's saying I don't have any relationship with him.
Right.
And it's like, hey, Kevin, no one's accusing you of wanting to date Brent Swadley, right? That's not, like, what does that mean? I don't have any relationship with Brent Swadley. The fact that you don't have a relationship with Brent Swadley does not in any way mean that all of the allegations in this saga couldn't absolutely be true.
That's true. Let's listen to this in this press conference.
And let me be clear. I do not have any sort of relationship with Brent Swadley. I don't know Brent Swadley. I have no involvement in this contract. I feel like I've met all 4 million Oklahomans at some point and shaken hands in all 77 counties. But it's troubling to me to see someone using the governor's name to manipulate the system or to try to get their way.
All right, so there you have it. That's the governor's own words and his own accent right there. So as we record this today, Twitter is going nuts, sharing this information, including the lawsuit from the state against Swadley's. Notable that the state is not using the attorney general.
Yeah, do we have any idea what the reasoning behind that is?
I mean, I was not in the room. My hunch is the AG is running for election, not re-election. He's not actually elected, but
sure,
he's running for an election right now. He might not want to touch it. Secondly, the attorney that they're using, this guy, Randy Calvert is his name. I believe he is a registered Democrat. I haven't looked him up in the voter file myself, but that's what I heard. And I maybe it's a way of them to ensure that they don't want any scent of like a pay to play, right? Like,
Sure.
because what's basically happening is a gubernatorial appointee has resigned because contracts that the state signed under his watch with this entity, who's a huge donor to the governor, right? Like, have gone south. It's been found out, right? That like this whole corruption thing has happened, and they're like, oh, okay, we have to cut all ties. Go find us a Democratic attorney. We got to be above board on this deal because it's only getting worse unless we pull up.
Sure. That's interesting. And when we say, because I just saw this right before you got here, when we say that the state is filing suit, like what entity? Like obviously it's the state of Oklahoma, but like who made this decision? Is it the legislature? Is it the governor? Like who decides the state? Like who decides the state is going to sue this person? Is it the AG's office and they're just using outside counsel? Is that, because I think that's how it usually works, right? Is the AG's office decides the state is going to sue this person?
I think so. I mean, I really don't totally understand. I'm sure that's a question that reporters would be looking into. On the actual petition, it says State of Oklahoma, comma, Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department. So like that's the plaintiff.
So it's all right. It's the department that signed the contracts is the one who is suing Swadley. All right.
Yes.
So
and that's basically like the reasoning, right? It says, on or about May 4th, 2020, the plaintiff and defendant entered into a contractual arrangement. That's before the pandemic, mind you.
What about, wait, what?
March 4th, 2020.
Oh, right before.
Yeah.
Like the week before.
Yeah. Yeah, a week or two before.
Yeah.
But still, this isn't a new thing.
Right.
This has been going on for a while. And so, yeah. I love reading legal filings. Maybe I'm a big nerd, but it says, as a result of defendant's knowing, reckless, and willful refusal to comply with its obligations and to provide an accounting, plaintiff has been damaged. Plaintiff being the state, right? Plaintiff is entitled to full and complete accounting from defendant. And so,
Because of you.
Yeah.
Right.
So today's been a lot of feisty language.
It really has. And there's something else that's happened with all this, something that has not happened for 5 years, which is that the House of Representatives have formed a special investigative committee. This is not something that is usually done. This is a special bipartisan convening of legislatures convened by the Speaker. It'll be chaired by Representative Ryan Martinez of Edmond. This is interesting because our normal committees, our regular committee, the Rules Committee, right? The Budget Committee. People can come testify for them. They can invite people to come testify before them. They're not obligated to hear testimony from the public, but they can. But they don't have subpoena power, right? Mm-hmm. So like the House Budget A and B Committee can't subpoena somebody if they want to. The Special Investigative Committee can, which means that whether they want to cooperate or not, involves parties like, I don't know, Jerry Winchester, Gino DeMarco, Brent Swadley, the governor, the lieutenant governor. All of those people could be compelled to come give their knowledge of the facts of this to this House Investigative Committee. Something that is interesting to me, and I'm curious, so Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell is, can we say he's a friend of the show? We've had him on at least once, if not twice.
He's definitely a previous guest.
Yeah. He is the like kind of nominal head of the tourism department, like in an advisory capacity. He doesn't actually have any like administrative role there. It is just, and that must be the reason why. It is just interesting, as much as he's been like kind of the tourism guy for the last 3.5 years, I don't feel like he's been named as being anywhere near any of this.
Yeah, no.
Right?
I mean, there was some questions, and he pretty quickly came out and said, "Hey,
I don't have anything to do with this, right?"
Yeah, and I doubt he did, right?
Right.
Like he's got other things to do. It is interesting, though. Aside from that, I mean, it is interesting, though. Right now, this deal, Swadley's and everything else, is being investigated by the state auditor, right, OSBI, and now the legislature. Like,
Yeah.
there's 3 concurrent investigations going on into this deal.
Do we have the like Law and Order, the like dunk dunk? I feel like we should like insert that right here, right?
It's
That's what this goes. So it's yeah. I mean, we'll see the documents that were. I saw them on Fox. There's been a lot of reporting on them. These documents that talk about all the quotes from Brent Swadley, like talking about like there's politics at work here that you can't possibly understand. Talking to like state inspectors, saying this is a quote from Brent Swadley. Governor Stitt asked me to put restaurants in all of his state parks.
right. So, but doesn't that sound like a man who is desperate to drop names?
I mean,
and
sure.
flex some power he doesn't actually have.
I mean, sure, but like, is it a stretch for me at all to believe that like there was a conversation between the governor and Brent Swadley where he was like, yeah, we should put some restaurants in the parks.
Well,
like,
so that's a good question. I would guess, right? And the governor said doesn't have a relationship with him. They've probably met, and I would wager that because
I would wager they've met several times.
Right. Well, I mean, right now people on Twitter are sharing screenshots of previous instances where Swadley's and the governor have been in the same place. For example, the Help Us Keep the Georgia Senate Seats Red fundraiser, and this is back in December, I guess, of 2020. Was it December of last year? I think it was December of 2020. Anyway, where Kevin Stitt, James Langford, Jim Inhofe were all there. And it was at Castle Falls Restaurant and Venue, I think here in Oklahoma. And this, the catering was provided by one Swadley's Barbecue, right? So, hosted by, Carol Robert Hefner and all these other groups I've never heard of, some roofing company. But this was I remember this being a big event, leveraging Georgia to raise money for Oklahoma lawmakers, and it was $1,000 to $5,000 per couple, catered by Swadley's Barbecue. And I remember at the time everyone being like, "It's a lot of money for a barbecue dinner."
He does a lot of catering at the Capitol.
He does. He was there like last week.
Yeah, there's a lot of catering at the
All this
Capitol.
going on. And then also, just 2 weeks ago, right, on April 15th, the governor's communications chief, right, Charlie Hanema, tweeted that picture that is now somewhat infamous, saying,
Great day for a Winchester burger.
Yeah, at Lake Murray, 10 out of 10. And a picture of it with the Swadley's logo. Now this is wild in a couple of ways.
Well, can I just say that this shows that a significant portion of the governor's communications staff are actually just professional trolls, right? Like that's
right.
Like he doesn't he doesn't communicate. He doesn't meet with the press. He doesn't give interviews. He doesn't take questions at so-called press conferences. He doesn't have a comm shop. He has a troll and own the libs Twitter shop, right? So let's just throw that out there.
That's, not entirely untrue. But secondly,
It's entirely untrue. It's completely true.
This is a gubernatorial appointed official, right, or position, who is essentially hawking cheeseburgers for a private business, right? Like he's using his public salary and position to advocate, support a private business. Now, we might see that happen in terms of passing tax credits for Panasonic or something like that. But rarely do you see an individual elected official or certainly an employee publicly on Twitter promote a private business that is currently being investigated by multiple state entities.
Yeah. I guess if I saw someone doing that, my question would be man, are they really a professional, or are they just some guy? That's
right.
That's what, but whatever.
That's fair.
Is this really a professional communications person? Is that somebody that is going to run comms for a presidential campaign?
Depends who the presidential campaign is.
You're not wrong.
Is he selling MyPillow or certain mattresses from a hotel bearing his name? Right.
It is the whole thing is just, and it does. I mean, I could sit here and like rag on the governor's calm people all day, but like this makes you wonder. So last week. I feel this is like, especially at the end of session, every day feels like it's a month long. It was last week that they passed the LEAD Act, right? So we're trying to woo Panasonic. So we're trying to woo Panasonic, right? In the time since we have passed this massive piece of legislation to try and attract Fortune 500 companies to put manufacturing here and to put business centers here or whatever. What has happened in Oklahoma politics since then? So one, this like scandal with the governor and corruption has like continued to like blow up, right? Yep. Two, we've passed a law that's even more restrictive regarding abortion than the laws that have already been passed over the past several years in Oklahoma, right? Three, we've passed a bathroom bill yesterday, right?
Bathroom bill, yes.
Right? We've passed, or the House at least, has passed a joint resolution that'll go back to the Senate. That would take a governor who's been mired in scandal and give him more direct power over the judiciary. We had a very contentious department or a Board of Education meeting yesterday where one of the governor's appointees, Trent Smith, said literally, I was appointed by the governor. I see my job on this board to do what the governor wants.
Right.
Like he said the quiet part out loud.
Right.
Right. And so I don't know, man. Like, is $1 billion subsidy enough to like get a company like Panasonic or any other company to come here? I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But like,
I mean, more importantly, right? Our state legislature has passed some of the most egregious, draconian, just downright hateful legislations directed at LGBTQ individuals, youth, kids, right? Like, I mean, censorship of books, all this kind of stuff, right? In the same week, Panasonic announced that they were a major supporter. They're now becoming a major supporter of the Trevor Project, which provides mental health support and resources and advocacy for LGBT youth in particular, right?
Yeah.
And so, what a juxtaposition, right? And so, if whenever Panasonic makes their announcement, if they don't choose Oklahoma, I wonder if they might put out a message saying, we're going with Kansas or Texas or wherever, and we're not taking Oklahoma because of this.
Yeah.
And if that happens, man, I feel like that's a big black eye on the governor, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the legislature.
And the legislature more than
both.
Yeah.
I mean, but both though, right? I mean, like the governor has made clear that these things are priorities of his, right? So, it's interesting. I sent you. I don't know if you read it yet because I sent it to you like 5:30 this morning. A really interesting piece that is, talking about. It was focused on Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida.
Oh, I did not read this. I saw it.
It's a really interesting piece, and it's talking about Ron DeSantis in Florida, and comparing him to Viktor Orban, who's the current president of Hungary. Is president or prime minister? I forget. Yeah. I think he's the president. I'd have to look at his exact title, but he's like
Scott. I'm surprised you don't know the governmental structure of Hungary.
Well, it's parliamentary, but I forget if they have a president and a PM or just both.
It's parliamentary, my dear Watson. Yeah.
Nice. So he's the PM. So he's the PM of Hungary, and he has become kind of a model of what some people, and I think it's a large and growing contingent of the right in this country, see for, and I don't want to say conservative because I don't think conservative is the right word for it. He has become a model for right-sided, right spectrum, right wing, I guess, like governance, which is essentially creating this narrative that there are cultural institutions like the media, academia, universities, entertainment, industry, even, that these are all cultural institutions that are dominated by the left, and that those cultural institutions are trying to like steal something or change like something that's intrinsic to, you know, Western or
Right.
in this case Hungarian, or in our case American, like identity. And that threat is so grave. One, that threat is grave, and two, the left's domination of those institutions cannot be countered. It can't be, there's no undoing that. So what you have to do instead, that is used as justification for using the power of the state to maybe violate the Constitution, rig elections, change voting laws, right? And so we have to do this because if we don't, it's not fair, right? The left controls all this stuff. So what we have to do is fight back using the power of the government by taking away vote by mail, by taking away tax status for Disney, right? By, you know, trying to push back by creating laws about who can use which bathroom, by pulling books out of public schools. That's the quote unquote the only way that we have to like fight the left. And so it's this guise of using, it's this guise of like saying you have to like fight fire with fire when there's really not even like a battle, right?
Right.
And so that's what Ron DeSantis is doing very effectively in Florida.
Yeah.
It's what a lot of people said that Trump would do. It's just that they found that Trump was like, you know, not competent and smart enough to pull it off. But it seems like, I don't know how much Governor Stitt knows about Viktor Orban, but that seems like what we're trying to do here
It's fear-mongering.
as well, right?
Right. It's just fear-mongering, right? It's making a boogeyman that sounds scary, that people will latch onto because it's an emotional argument.
Right.
Even if it's not a logical argument, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, the legislature all the time bans things that aren't actual threats.
Right. And I think that a big part of this too, I think a big part of this is that they recognize, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, you know, but we'll know in a month or so. I think the expectation from many people, myself included, and then, you know, constitutional scholars and people that watch the Supreme Court much closer than I do, the expectation is the Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe, right? And so states like Oklahoma will be free to ban abortion with, as you know, to whatever extent they want to. So then that becomes, if you're the right, okay, so now what, right?
Right.
That's been your singular, like, banning abortion and tax cuts have been your singular focus for like 30 freaking years, right?
Right.
Well, I don't know that taxes can like physically get any lower, right? I mean, I guess they could, but right, even taxes are so low now that even the Republican supermajority in like Oklahoma, the Oklahoma House and Senate is like, I don't know if we should cut taxes anymore, bro.
Right.
Right? Like, so we've reached our limit there. Abortion's going to be overturned.
Right. What's
So
left?
now what? What do you have left?
They gotta.
And then I mean, and so I think that a lot of this, like, I think that a lot of this, like, this fear mongering over like LGBTQ youth, critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, it is trying to create another. It is trying to create another. Another battle in this cultural war because that's all they have left. Like, that's all they have.
Right.
Right.
Well, and I mean, if they feel like they lost some of these things, and now they got a few wins under their belt, they're going back to things they lost, right?
Right.
I honestly, I thought about this morning. I was washing some dishes this morning, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago if I thought that LGBTQ rights
would be under threat, you'd say no. That's a
no,
settled
I thought
issue.
that was a settled thing.
Right. Right.
Hasn't our society moved past this?
Right.
Most of the rest of the world has.
Right.
And yet here we are,
Right.
dicking
Right.
around about who pees where.
Right. The other thing is, and the other thing is that this is also what you see, and now this is obviously not the case in Oklahoma, but at a national level, this is what you see from a party who knows that, one, to retain power, they only need a minority of people.
Because the structure is designed to protect that minority.
Right. And so they are taking more and more and more steps to entrench that structure,
Yes.
so that they can retain more power with fewer votes.
Yeah.
Right. And they're using the culture war as the vehicle for why that entrenchment of that structure is necessary.
Yes. And what I think is interesting, Scott, is that we are starting to see in small areas fissures even within that party, right? Because, when you use a tool like that, when you benefit from this, like a large structural cleaving of society, at some points, like the monster gets more powerful, right? And so you see, as one example, closed primaries, right? So in Oklahoma, we have a partially closed primary system. It is up to the parties to decide if they want to only let members of their party vote in the primary, or if they want to open it up to other people. The way it has been for the last several years or several cycles is that the Democratic Party allows independents to vote in the Democratic primary. The Republicans and the Libertarians only let Republicans and Libertarians in their respective parties, right? So it's like a mostly closed system. That also like promotes, I think, this belief that independents are all liberal, which is not the case. A good number of independents in Oklahoma are probably conservative.
Most of the ones that I know are more conservative than liberal.
But they only get to vote in the Democratic primaries, right? And that means that those, we'll say, moderately conservative, or who knows, whatever, independents don't have a chance to cast a vote in the Republican primaries, and thus they don't have the opportunity to moderate those elections. And so primary elections continue to become more and more partisan, more and more fringe, farther and farther right, farther and farther left in some ways. And that means that the old Chamber of Commerce, like fiscal conservative, but perhaps socially liberal Republicans, have been weeded out. And we saw this year, we're seeing this year, I don't know if it's record, but a number of Republicans not seek re-election because they don't want to face some fringe candidate that's trying to primary them, because they can't out-conservative some of these people, right? Like, when people have no morals, when they are unmoored to some kind of societal norm and they're just willing to say anything, right? The comments from John Bennett this week about
that guy.
He's
lost it even for him.
Right, I mean, he's way out there, right? And like threatening violence in all kinds of ways, and it's just terrifying and honestly sad.
I mean, did you see me that he said that Anthony Fauci should be tried and then put in front of a firing squad?
Yes.
So that tells you, he doesn't actually think he should be tried, right? Right. It doesn't count if you're like the outcome of the trial will be execution.
Right.
Then like that's not a trial.
Well, because he's assuming everyone sees the world the way he does.
Right.
Which is not the case.
It is astonishing to me, and I think we've talked about this on the show before. I know you and I have talked about it before, and I've been spending a lot of time with this. It is astonishing to me how much, especially like during COVID, right? Like people talked about like liberals or Democrat people that don't want to live in fear of the virus, or like, of the two major like political movements or parties in this country, I don't see the Democrats as the ones that are dominated by fear, right? Like,
oh, right.
Right? It is astonishing to me that like the party of like America and like I would die for my country, or at least that's a bad way to put it, because there are obviously people on both sides of the aisle who have sacrificed like blood and lives for the United States. But like these people that are like very militant about like guns and fearlessness and like kick somebody's ass or whatever,
right, are
like, they're the party that's afraid of everything.
Right.
Right?
If you're not afraid, why do you need 30 guns and live in the woods kind of thing?
I mean, right? Like, I'm just like,
Well, and
it's similar, like, how much of when this is, we've talked religion and stuff before on the show, but like how much of like Christianity in the U.S. is like dominated by fear, which is like the opposite of what you're supposed to be as a Christian.
Yeah.
I think, right? Like,
well, both of us grew up in the church. We've had this conversation probably on the podcast and certainly offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I frequently feel, especially these days, that the lessons I learned in church are not what's being taught now. Like, it's a whole different narrative.
I mean,
I thought it was about humility and forgiveness and loving thy neighbor.
I haven't been to a traditional church in a really long time, so I don't know, but I suspect you're right. That's certainly what it seems like.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I attended a local Life Church campus for most of 2015, I think. That was probably the most recent spell that I was in church, and it was not about fear. It wasn't really about faith a whole lot either. It was good music. But not to be disparaging as Life Church. That's just their... I think everyone listening has probably been or knows their model. I want to finish my thought about primaries, though.
Yes, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. I just want to put a fine point on the fact that our closed primary system promotes extremism, right? And what Oklahoma should do is repeal closed primaries, and we should repeal closed primaries and move towards open primaries, which is what we see from states that have honestly just better outcomes. Not everybody, but by and large, the states that let all voters vote, you end up with better outcomes, and it makes voters feel more engaged, right?
Yeah.
And if, as I've said on the show and in the world many times, either you want everybody to vote or you don't. And if you do, you do everything you can to make it easier for them to vote. And I strongly think that that's the way we should go. We should repeal closed primaries. And in fact, Senator Lonnie Paxton had a bill this year that would do just that.
Did it get heard?
It didn't get heard.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of him for running it. So Paxton was the chair of the Senate Redistricting Committee. So obviously we're on opposite sides of how that happened. But I really appreciated that he did that. I need to send him an email, actually. I haven't sent him a thank you email for doing that bill. But I was a little bit surprised, and I suspect, knowing him, the little bit that I do, that was probably prompted by the fact that he doesn't like having to try to be more extreme, right, just to win an election. He's someone who strikes me someone who, cares about his state and would generally like to govern it in a way that is responsible and equitable and somewhat fair for most people. And closed primaries is not the way to do it.
Yeah. No, yeah. What else?
That's a good question. I'm trying to scroll through here. I will say, Scott, not all local news websites are created equal.
That is a factual statement.
They're all kind of annoying in their own way, but some are definitely better than others. So I guess, thus far we haven't seen a response from Brent Swadley about this whole deal, right?
I mean, I also, the governor and I have this in common. I do not have a relationship with Brent Swadley, so I can't, know what he's doing. I think that if I was Brent Swadley, I would have found myself a lawyer about this time, and I could be wrong, but I think that lawyer probably would have told me, stop talking to anyone.
Right.
Don't stop saying anything to anyone.
Yeah.
So
maybe
maybe he found a lawyer, and that's the reason for his silence.
Yes. Shut up. Stop talking. That's exactly right. So another thing that has been a big deal, especially for our listeners down in Norman, is this issue of turnpikes, right? And I think we've talked about this before. We talked about Chairman Wallace running a bill to build these turnpikes down there. So this week on Tuesday, the Turnpike Authority approved taking out a $200 million line of credit with Wells Fargo to pay for engineering, expansion, or construction of toll roads in advance of what would estimate to be a $5 billion statewide expansion.
I was like, $200 million does not seem like very much.
Not for roads. If it was in my account, it would feel like a whole lot. We could run Let's Fix This for a long time on $200 million.
That's Mitt Romney money.
That's Mitt Romney money. So the Council of Bond Oversight, which is a council I didn't know existed until I read about this. It's the state treasurer and some other members appointed by the governor and the speaker and the pro tem. They've twice now postponed review of the $5 billion request since that expansion was announced back in February. The hearing is coming up on May 4th now. This whole program is called Access Oklahoma. The governor supports it. It includes those new turnpikes like South OKC, Moore, Norman, expansion of the Kilpatrick over, like farther south. Basically, the governor wants to build a full loop around Oklahoma City. He didn't, he's from Tulsa, so he doesn't really understand how things work down here. But and then some other improvements to the state's system. Obviously, as I think most of us know, the residents of Norman are very upset about this because there was no public consultation about this. He just was like, the plan came out and said, boom, here's the turnpikes. As it turns out, those turnpikes go through the only place in the entire world where rose rocks exist, which is our state rock. It seems like what a stupid thing to do to like destroy something that is already acknowledged by your state as being special. And
it's the only place in the world where you find it. Not the only place, not just the only place in Oklahoma, the only place in the world.
Right, the whole world. And then it also displaces a ton of people and property. And normally there's all these reports and assessments that have to happen before these kind of plans are approved. And none of those have been done. No environmental impact, none of this stuff.
Kind of the way that none of the fire inspections were done at the barbecue joints.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Kind of like that.
It's very similar. So this whole thing is really odd. Where they're like, okay, the people don't want these turnpikes. The legislature pulled some of the bills. They're like, oh, we're not doing this. Okay, but there's still a hearing about this $5 billion bond request, which I think at this point will be denied.
Right.
But they took out a $200 million. Well, they approved the taking out of a $200 million line of credit. And it's and maybe they're just listen, we got to do some of these things in case it passes, but we're putting the cart before the horse.
How many Foggy Bottom kitchens do you think you can build for $200 million?
Well, if you want to do the math, about 10.
Wow, that's not very many.
I guess, to be fair, they spent $16 million on how many? 7?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, so 70. That's a lot more. We're still waiting on the actual price of the...
how many Winchester burgers can you buy for $200 million?
Not, Scott, I'll be honest. I think this is going the right direction where they closed everything down. They put, tarps over the signage and all that stuff, which feels like... It reminds me of the day that they removed the Ten Commandments monument from the Capitol.
Right.
Under darkness, all
the
helicopter lights shining on, watching them do it. But anyway, I was going to propose to you that we record today at Roman Nose at one of the state parks and go have a burger and record while we're there. But they closed them down too quickly. We don't get to go. I do honestly.
You can offer the Let's Fix This review of the Winchester burger.
What we should do is we should visit either a local barbecue establishment, or speaking of burgers, we should do our live event at New State again, we did before.
We definitely should. I think we may know a guy.
We do, yeah. We did a live show there before. That was a lot of fun. If we can find a day where it's not as windy, that would be nice.
I'm saying, right?
One other thing that kind of slipped under the radar for me, because it's not in my part of the state, but it's up in Mays County, which is where Pryor is. The county commissioners there approved a TIF district. That's a tax increment financing district for the Mid-America Industrial Park.
Yes.
Which is somewhat infamous now because of Canoe and potentially Panasonic.
Indeed.
So this deal is like a $300 million tax increment financing deal where a bunch of it would basically go to help fund infrastructure needs. I'm assuming water and sewer and electricity and those kinds of things. And then $150 million would go to schools, VOTEC, other local entities that rely on property taxes to fund their operations. And this is all because basically the way that a TIF works, I think, Scott, you can correct me,
I will not be able to correct you.
but I think it's basically like TIFs allow like government entities to use a portion of property taxes that are generated within the district to invest in the district's infrastructure. So rather than those tax dollars going into the general fund to be sprinkled around the county or whatever, it like keeps that money there. So like if a TIF district is created and then they generate a ton of property tax value, right? So let's say, I don't know, an electric vehicle manufacturer builds a big plant there. Suddenly the value of that land goes up, of that property. The taxes they pay on that land then get reinvested into that local area for schools, for roads, for, sewer, water, electricity, all those things. Because obviously there's going to be a higher need for it. It's a way to kind of keep that. Now that might come at the exclusion of that money being elsewhere in the county, right? So it helps that local area, but not the county at large.
And the thought process is that by investing in the infrastructure within those districts, you will promote further development. That development will lead to higher property values, more property taxes. And so it's by investing here, we're ultimately going to generate higher tax revenues for the county as a whole.
Yeah.
Is the way that it's supposed to work.
Right.
There's been, I think, a lot of debate about how effective these are. And I think you can point to data that shows they work really well, and you can point to data that shows they don't. I think it depends on the district and how it's designed and what does or doesn't go there.
Yeah. On a totally unrelated note, the director of OMA, the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, Adria Berry, said that, this is in a Tulsa World article, that a lot has changed in their sector and they're kind of stepping up. Things are getting better. OMA has doubled their staff from 100 to 200, which means they've got like more field inspectors across the state that they didn't have before. They didn't have near enough, so now that's out there. And then I think they've passed that seed to sale program that will basically track individual plants from seed to sale, which should cut down, I think, on like illegal activity. What basically means like illegally grown weed can't get in to be legally sold.
Right.
And in theory, I think you have to account for how many seeds and plants and whatever you have, so you wouldn't be selling on the side in the black market as well. And so, it'll be interesting. I've heard that the seed to sale program might result in higher prices for customers, but I don't know. I've also heard like the price of weed is legal weed is like super cheap. You can get, I saw a billboard the other day for like joints for $1.99, something like that. And people are like, oh, we're not making any money. And it's like, yeah, but I also saw like another billboard, because there's billboards everywhere, right? That talks about how much some of this stuff costs. And it seems like it would be a lot. Like, I don't understand the finances of this, but there's a lot of gray area. Like,
right.
It seems like it should either be super lucrative, and based on the number of businesses around, it seems that way. Also, they're all cash only because of federal law, and so maybe that's part of the deal, but very curious. We should have someone like Ryan Kiesel on the show to talk about where things are at. I think he's involved with one of the initiative petitions.
For like full legalization?
Yeah, recreational, adult use recreational. I think they don't say legalization, they say adult use recreation. Scott, the other thing that happened this week was hearings on candidate challenges, candidacy challenges.
Yes.
Did you watch any of this on Tuesday?
I did not get to watch any of it. The main thing I saw was that Sean Roberts, not the Patriot Roberts, but Sean Roberts, will be allowed to remain on the ballot, but he's not allowed to have the Patriot on the ballot.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, so I think we talked about that on a previous episode.
We talked about, but that was this week that got determined, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
We talked about how we thought that would happen, and indeed, it did. He's on the ballot, but he is not the Patriot. It was funny because current labor commissioner Leslie Osborne, she had former AG Hunter be her representative or counsel for that, and then she called like Representative Chris Canady was one of her like witnesses or whatever. It feels like a pseudo court kind of thing they do up there. But I was like, you have representation, because like Emily Virgin represented somebody else.
Cindy Munson.
Oh yeah. I was just like, I guess she's an attorney. This all makes sense, but it seemed very odd. But it was very funny because Roberts was like, one of his items he entered into evidence was like a birthday card he received from somebody that said like, "You are the patriot." And he's like, "Look, I go by this, yeah." And so that's pretty funny. I think on the whole there was like 17 hours of hearings, and at the end of the day, only 3 candidates were stricken from the ballot. 2 of which did so voluntarily. Like one of them.
I wasn't going to win anyway.
Well, they alleged that the incumbent did not live in the district, and then when they got to the opening remarks of the day, they said, "I'm really sorry for wasting everyone in this room's time," and then they didn't show up for their actual hearing. So like,
that's amazing.
They just like were like, "Oh, whoops, I'm busted, I'm out." Otherwise, I think everybody else is on the ballot. There wasn't any. We mentioned in the Democratic run for Langford seat, Jason Bollinger was challenging the candidacy of Madison Horn, saying that she didn't actually live here. They both had representation. I think Madison Horn's attorney was Brian Ted Jones, who was
I believe
friend of the
that's
show.
right. Yep.
And then Jason's attorney was someone at Crow and Dunlevy, also friends of the show. And so, anyway, it all sorted out. Everyone's on the ballot. Yahoo.
The last thing, do we have anything else? There's only one other thing I was going to mention.
Go for it.
Just this is a in memoriam. We did have a loss this week of former Seminole Nation Principal Chief Enoch Kelly Haney, who died last weekend. Chief Haney was a state senator for several years. I think he was there for his full 12 years. He was the principal chief of the Seminole Nation. He also was a prolific native artist. If you've ever driven by the Capitol and looked at the statue that adorns the top of the dome, Chief Haney was the artist behind that statue. So Governor Stitt, appropriately, has ordered that state and American flags be flown at half-staff from 5 p.m. today until 8 a.m. Monday to honor the passing of Chief Haney.
Yeah, I didn't know Chief Haney, but the remarks that I've seen from those who did are truly moving.
Yeah.
That is a big loss for our state. Well, Scott, the one thing we didn't really address this week, and I think we probably need to get some additional perspectives on this, is the issue of abortion. Golly, we passed yet another anti-abortion bill, I guess today or yesterday, Thursday, this week. This is like the third one this session, all of which have billed themselves as a total ban on abortion.
Right.
This one is modeled after the one in Texas that adds like the bounty, right? Where in theory people could, call in their neighbor for saying they drove their wife to get an abortion, and their neighbor could be fined $10,000.
Well, minimum.
Minimum, right.
Yeah.
The bill is already in litigation, as we knew it would be. It is unconstitutional and it violates the Equal Protection Clause and the separation of powers and all kinds of. It's like just a mess. I talked to several attorneys. They all said, it's a mess.
Do all of those attorneys that think it's unconstitutional and a mess think that the Supreme Court of these United States will agree that it is an unconstitutional mess?
I think they. I don't want to speak for those attorneys. I'll just answer for me. I think they'll probably put a stay on it. Or injunction, and put it on hold pending SCOTUS ruling on this other case that would affect Roe, right? And if it
Dobbs.
Yeah, and if Roe gets overturned, we're back to the Wild West here.
I mean, right. Which it seems increasingly like what's going to happen. So.
Yeah, I guess we'll just end up with states where it's legal and states where it's not.
Yeah. And then the next, at least one of the next battles is going to be Missouri has tried to do this, Idaho has tried to do this, I think some others. There are states that are trying to say not only is it illegal to get an abortion in our state, But if you live in Missouri, it is against the law for you to travel to another state to get an abortion while you live in Missouri. I don't see how you can possibly say that that's constitutional, but whatever. Not whatever, but like I don't know anymore. Like,
Right.
Like I don't know anymore how much like what seems like a settled established law like matters.
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of, Scott, is
Handmaid's Tale?
well, maybe I haven't watched that, but it reminds me of, from what I've heard, yes. But I sent you a picture this week. I have some relatives that are Iranian, and I saw a picture of their Iranian passports, right, from Iran. And at the bottom, it says it in Arabic, but then
Farsi.
Yeah, Farsi. And then at the bottom, it said in English, and it said basically like the bearer of this passport is not allowed to travel to Israel.
To the occupied Palestine.
Yeah, right. They didn't even say Israel. They just said the occupied Palestine. But the idea that a state would try to prevent their own residents from going somewhere else for healthcare,
Right.
is, golly, that's like a level of autocracy and that I just would not have imagined even a year ago,
Yeah.
2 years ago. It's really frightening in lots of ways.
On that note,
Yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of the episode. Listeners, thanks for hanging with us. If this episode sounded a little Debbie Downer, that's because this week was a lot Debbie Downer. It was a
pretty Debbie Downer.
difficult week for a lot of people in Oklahoma. Listeners, though, please don't give up. It is difficult, but hope is not lost. A quote that I think of often from Dr. Martin Luther King: "The moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice." Wherever we are on that arc, it feels like it's bending the other way right now. But trust that is not the case. We will get there. You are not alone. We are not alone. We're in this together. And I guess remember that decisions are made by those who show up. Have a good week.